think that the word feminist reeked of insecurity. A woman that needed to state she was equal to a man clearly wasn't. And besides, I didn't really feel the need for the word when I was younger. By the time I was 20 years old, I had lived in 4 separate countries. And growing up as a girl in Czechoslovakia, Sweden, France, United States, was as different from one another as the languages themselves. Curiously, one word that is the same in all 4 languages is feminist. In 1973, my family moved from Czechoslovakia to Sweden. I was 9 years old, and my first day in school, I got bullied by a boy for being an immigrant. And my only friend, this tiny little girl, shot around the corner and punched him in the face. Okay, I was really grateful, obviously, but mostly I was just incredibly impressed. In Czechoslovakia, if a girl was bullied, she would tattle or she would cry, but I looked around the school hallways to see if anybody else had noticed this amazing feat, and nobody was even vaguely surprised. And so I thought to myself, this is the first time I sort of had the notion that by being physically in a different location, it was like I was a different person. Just by being in Sweden, I had suddenly acquired power equal to that of a boy. In Czechoslovakia, my grandmother and all the other women that I knew had full-time jobs, and then they would come back home, and they would cook, clean, take care of the kids, while the husbands relaxed in the pub. And in return, they were cajoled and ignored and occasionally even abused by their husbands, not unlike domestic animals, but like mentally unstable domestic animals, like milk cows that would go crazy and kick over the milk bucket if you didn't know just how to treat them. And the word feminist in Czechoslovakia in the 1970s would have been used for those women, the mad cows. Meanwhile, in Sweden, everybody had day jobs as well, but then they got home and the tasks were divided. The first time I saw my girlfriend's father go to the supermarket, make a dinner, and then actually clean the dishes, I was blown away. But pretty soon, even my own Czech-born father started cooking and cleaning. Why? Because he divorced my mother and married a Swedish woman. Yeah, a happy divorce. By the time middle school neared in Sweden, boys started to shoot up, girls started to fill out, and the dynamics between boys and girls really started to change. Now, us, the girls, were even way more powerful because we had something that the boys really wanted. Yeah, in school dances, the boys would be lining the walls at the gym with hopeful smiles. And us girls, we would walk through and make our selections of the boy we wanted to dance with or make out with. We were like a bunch of benevolent queens dispensing favors. And the boy who got chosen, well, he was envied and he was applauded. Slut shaming? What is this word, slut? Now, sex education in Sweden was begun at grade 4. So at around the age of 10, we learned all about venereal disease and pregnancy, but also fun stuff like masturbation and where the clitoris is located and what it does. By grade 8 and 9, so 14-ish, a lot of the kids in our school were having regular sex. And I have to say, I never heard of anybody getting pregnant or having an abortion. Condoms were distributed by the school nurse for free without any questions asked. Now, for a girl to own her sexuality was to own her own body, to own herself. And it was really empowering to know that your fortunes and your misfortunes were in no way dependent on anybody else but yourself. Like, the responsibility for you was your own. In Sweden, it was understood that a woman could do anything a man could, but she could also, when she chose to, bear children, so it gave us a leg up. The word feminist in Sweden in the 1970s was kind of like the word cassette tape, antiquated. Now, at the age of 15, I moved to Paris, and the first thing that really struck me was how differently the men behaved. They were holding doors open for me and pulling out chairs for me and trying to stick my overcoat on me like I was completely incompetent or stupid. And this was the second time I understood that by being in a different location, I was suddenly somebody else. I had gone from a powerful young girl to a delicate woman in need of constant assistance. Instead of being flattered by this, I, a Swedish woman, felt patronized. So I asserted myself the only way I had learned how, which was by being sexually assertive. The thing is, it's rather hard to meet a man in France by being sexually assertive. I would go to discotheques and I would dance my way to some guy to let him know he was the chosen one. And most frequently, he would run away if I was covered in anthrax. And on the chance that he didn't run away, he'd ask me how much I charged. I mean, this was, to me, kind of unexpected, but hey, it turned out that Frenchmen really preferred their women sort of wily and manipulative and all elegant and silky on the outside, yet sharp and titanium on the inside. And my best friend at the time, the girl that worked in my agency, tried to teach me what it was like to be a French woman. So the things I remember was never hide your flaws. Accentuate them, because confidence is the sexiest part of the woman. That's cool. And if you don't feel confident, fake it until you feel confident. Good advice. Also, wear lingerie every day for yourself. I suppose the constant discomfort of a lace thong reminds you where your power lied. Now, French women did have power. They did have power. But it seemed to be sort of agreed upon thing to keep it hidden. It was sort of like a sharpened stiletto blade in a lipstick case. And the word feminist in France at that time, well, it was actually mostly used for very masculine women, women who kind of looked like men. And since the power in France lay in femininity, masculinity wasn't exactly seen as a strength. To me, this all seemed like this hidden, manipulative power was like, that's how people who felt inferior would act. I felt a warrior needed nothing but her sword. And so I slashed my way through men of all nationalities, and I was forgiven mostly, now I realize, because I was young and hot. Also Swedish. It's interesting, when I said to people I was from Sweden, it seemed to come with some sort of understanding that that meant that I would drop my top at any moment and have indiscriminate sex. Now, I found it puzzling why my power translated this way, because obviously I would take my top off on the beach, but not in a restaurant, like, you know, French women. Although they probably wouldn't take their top off in a park. And indiscriminate sex, excuse me, I was very discriminating. I only slept with guys I thought were hot. It was not until I came to the US and fell in love with an American man and bore 2 American children that I really had to rearrange my sexual notions and habits, beliefs, cultural notions. Because it turned out that in America, sex was not seen as a healthy habit or a shiny bargaining tool for power or even matrimonial maintenance, but instead it was kind of secret and a little bit dirty, not unlike going to the bathroom. Sure, the insinuation of sex, sold anything from guns to cars to beer. But the minute I mentioned masturbation, all ears in the vicinity would go red. And at the word orgasm, men would make smutty remarks, and women would clam up and go, oh, this is like personal stuff. And I thought, well, you know, everything and anything about sex here was personal. And to me, the distinction between personal private and personal shameful is very thin. Even my former gynecologist would always talk about the weather and vacations when he gave me a pelvic exam, as though I was a delicate Victorian maiden who'd rather not know where my bits and pieces were. Also, sex seemed to be especially shameful if a woman sought it out, because that made her a slut. What is a slut? Apparently a woman who likes sex. What is a man who likes sex? Oh yeah, a man. Right. It seemed to me that in the United States, a woman's body belonged pretty much to everybody else but herself. Her sexuality and her nudity belonged to her husband, her opinion of herself belonged to her social circles, and her uterus was contested by the government. In the United States, a woman had to do it all while looking permanently youthful at 2/3 of the salary of a man. Now, American important men are desirable. American important women have to be desirable. This was the third time that I realized that I had not changed, and yet I was somebody else. I was no longer delicate and needed constant assistance, but instead I was told, along with all my American sisters, that we could do anything. And then we're knocked down the moment we proved it. Now, I understand that I've made some really sweeping generalizations, and whether they are valid or not, those were my experiences. But I can see that you guys would think, oh, Ms. Former Supermodel, like, what do you know about real life and real women, right? I mean, how valid can your opinions be given that you're a rich, white, famous woman? And I'd have to say, you're right. You've got a good point. But if you just consider this for a moment, I am a woman at the top of privilege. I'm like the most privileged woman ever. And yet, I have fewer choices and less freedom than an average guy. Now, out of all the countries that I've lived in, Sweden is the one that came the closest to perfect equality between men and women. And you know what? Nothing is perfect. All that perfect gender equality has produced some really odd side effects that people are not aware of. Like, for example, I strongly suspect that the Swedes may be physically the rudest nation in the world. Because all of that equality is like everybody has the same right to be in the same place at the same time. And so in public spaces, people are pushing and shoving like crazy. And if you're the sort of woman who likes an appreciative male glance, you'll be permanently invisible. It's up to the woman to wolf call in Sweden. And then, when sex is no more magical than a good tennis game, the romance sort of goes out the window. I mean, it turns out that mystery is what makes sex sexy. And so without it, it's kind of like an aerobic session with a couple of rewarding sneezes at the end. Now, in the Czech Republic, women do have paid health care, and they have abortion rights, and they have really nice long paid parental leave. But it's still about how much of a load they can carry as women, because men are not expected to do any housework or childcare. And did I mention that a lot of the nicknames for women in the Czech Republic tend to the animal category, like little bug, kitten, swine, old cow? And in France, all that constant pressure pressure on grooming and maintaining sexual allure is like a full-time job on top of a job. There's no wonder that they are second only in medication prescription abuse, right after the US. But once I became an American by choice, I realized that I had to accept rules from which I was no longer exempt. And so I joined my American sisters in trying to do it all or failing to do it all, but also in hope and excitement, because still to this day, I'm an American by choice, so there is no other country in the world that holds as much possibility as America. And when we were about to welcome our first female president, I was like, yes, I was happy and I was excited. And to a certain extent, I felt really vindicated, because I was like, yes, I made the right choice to live here, because this is not only the country where choice is possible, but it's where choice is happening. America was finally ready to welcome the power of the female. Right, so as an American woman in 2018, I don't have much choice but to rescue that dusty old word out of the drawer, polish it back up. So here I go. Hi, my name is Paulina Porizkova, and I'm a feminist.